Yes, this is Unit 6, Section 1, Flip Podcast. This is the early years of the American Revolutionary War. In this particular podcast, we'll be discussing the years of 1976-77 as they relate to the American Revolution, how the battles went for the colonists at that time. Well, the first thing I want to talk about with you class is the different advantages that the Patriots had and the British had, as well as some Patriot disadvantages that they encountered during the American Revolution. Well, let's take a look at the Patriot advantages first. 1. The Patriots were fighting on their own turf. And simply put, that the Patriots knew where all the ambush sites, were the trails and paths and roads that would make moving an army easier. And it's just an advantage if you know the terrain that you're fighting on. Another advantage that the Patriots had was they were fighting for their own freedom. And the British, on the other hand, were simply fighting for money. So if you're fighting for your own land, your own freedom, you're going to be a lot more motivated to fight than somebody that's just fighting for a paycheck. England had a lot of advantages too. One was they had the strongest navy in the world. Also, they had a very well-trained army. And not only with that training, they were also very experienced. They had been fighting wars against France and Spain for hundreds of years. And if you just look at it from a sheer population standpoint, England had 8.5 million people that lived in England. The colonies only had 2.5 million. So there's a big population. There's a big population discrepancy between the amount of people that England has and the amount of people that the colonies have. Some disadvantages for the colonists: they had no navy. No navy, poorly equipped. They didn't have the necessary equipment that they needed. They had very little gunpowder, very little artillery pieces. They didn't even have uniforms for their soldiers. Very few rifles or guns to even use. So they were very poorly, and they were also poorly trained at first. They were poorly trained. So these are just some basic advantages and disadvantages that the Patriots had, and the British advantages. Next, I want to talk about two groups of people that lived in the colonies. If you lived in the colonies at this time, you would probably either be a patriot or a loyalist. Both of them had some similarities. Both of these groups of people faced harassment from each other. The Patriots kind of looked at the loyalists as ungrateful and like a traitor against their principle and their causes and the fight for independence. And then the loyalists would look back on the Patriots and think of them as mobsters, troublemakers, unthankful to the crown. So both of them went back and forth harassing each other. Both groups were colonists, of course. Both of them lived in the colonies. And both groups tried to convince each other to join their side. Some differences between the two. Most of the Patriots fought in the Revolutionary War, while only some of the Loyalists fought. The Patriots were led by the Sons of Liberty. And remember, the Sons of Liberty are primarily based in New England. The Loyalists, on the other hand, answered to the king, worked for the king, or benefited from the status quo. Many of them had jobs as tax collectors and customs collectors for the king. Actions of the Patriots, they led boycotts and protests as well as fighting. The Loyalists, sometimes due to the harassment, went back to Britain. Next, I want to talk about the colonists and their ability to raise an army, or the lack thereof. When the colonists in the Second Continental Congress decided to create an army, they decided that each man would sign up for a 1-year enlistment term. That means they would agree to fight in the Continental Army for 1 year. At the end of 1 year, no matter what was happening or where they were, they could return home to their homes, farms, and businesses. And that causes a problem later on when we talk about raising an army. This army had little supplies. So it's made it more difficult to serve in the Continental Army. And as far as African Americans go in the Continental Army, at first, none were allowed to serve. And especially in the South, of course we know why. Most of the African Americans in the South were slaves. So they did, they made a 1-year enlistment term, and they were able to get some people into the Continental Army, but you see later on, we're going to talk about that. That's going to be a problem later on. We've talked about the battles of Lexington and Concord, and we've talked about the Battle of Bunker Hill. We've talked about Washington freeing Boston with the cannons that they had captured from Fort Ticonderoga. I want to talk now about the colony of New York. In the summer of 1776, Britain decides to really get serious, and they send 32,000 British troops, 32,000 more troops to New York. They were getting serious. They were going to put down this rebellion once and for all. And to make a small comparison, the Continental Army at this time was 18,000 troops total under the command of George Washington. One of the next major clashes they had was at Long Island, New York, in which the colonists were soundly defeated. They were soundly defeated by General Howe, who's in charge of these additional 32,000 troops that the country of England had sent over to the colonies to put down the rebellion. They were soundly defeated by General Howe. The colonists retreated to New Jersey. The Continental Army retreated to New Jersey. They were poorly equipped. They didn't have any training. This is one of the first battles in which they met in open field. The experience of the British Army and the training that they had showed. The Continental Army was really no match for these seasoned British troops.